This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. Regular commentator Fred Rotondaro says the border crisis should be seen as a pro-life issue among Catholics and others. Journalist Chuck McCutcheon explains the secret language spoken inside the Beltway, and Bill Press interviews Michael Wager running for Congress in Northeast Ohio. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans and Rush Limbaugh dominating the airwaves? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. With the Conference of Catholic Bishops and the Jesuit Society pushing hard for a compassionate response to the influx of unaccompanied Central American children, commentator Fred Rotondaro says he would like to see church leaders turn the screws on congressional Republicans. And we say hello to our old friend, regular commentator Fred Rotondaro, a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress and a contributor to the Huffington Post as well as americasdemocrats.org. Also chairman of the board of the organization Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. Fred Rotondaro, always great to talk to you. Thanks for joining us on americasdemocrats.org.
Thank you, Jim.
So 2 issues today that involve Catholic theology and U.S. politics. Let's start with the Supreme Court decision granting religious rights to corporations by allowing the Hobby Lobby chain to refuse to pay health insurance claims for contraception. As a progressive Catholic, what's your view on that?
I hate the idea. Corporations should not have religious rights. As a progressive Catholic, I like to think that religion should be free. We need religion in this country. We need freedom of religion, but I don't think corporations should have it. I should point out, by the way, that as chair of Catholics in Alliance, that some people on my board, some people on our staff don't agree with me. They say, no, the more religious freedom there is, even if it's for corporations, the better off things are. I very, very strongly disagree. I think it sets a horrible precedent for a lot of things that corporations are doing that are very, very wrong, including, very frankly, the fact that a couple of years ago, 4 years ago, I think, the Supreme Court said that corporations were, in effect, people and could contribute unlimited amounts of money to political campaigns. So I don't like this parallel development. I think it's wrong. I think it's bad for the country.
And this decision, does it mean that not only are corporations under Citizens United considered to be persons, as you point out, but are they now under Hobby Lobby considered to have souls as well?
I hope they don't have souls, because most corporations I know are going to be doomed to the eternal fires of hell for all eternity. So hopefully they won't have souls. No,
I only know of soulless corporations myself. So,
in as much as I know we're not allowed to swear on this, I will not comment on. I will not comment on that. I should point, as an aside, that whereas so many of my conservative friends, and I still have some, look upon big government as the biggest problem in America, I look at the control of corporations over the Republican Party and the massive influence of corporations on the Democratic Party as the biggest problem we have in the United States, and as a problem that, if not solved, is going to lead to a very, very different kind of future for my grandkids than I had when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right, now, the second part of what was the first question, the lesser-known case 4 days after the Hobby Lobby decision. Mm-hmm. Didn't the court go even further in denying women access to contraception? Perhaps you can briefly explain that case and what it means. Yeah, they did. It was a small college in Illinois, and I think it was run by a religious group, Wheaton College, and they did not want to participate in the contraceptive. They did not want to participate in distribution of contraceptives. So they were told, well,
fine. They don't have to, since this is a religious college. There was no question about corporate structure. And what they would have to do would be to fill out a form that said they did not want to participate. And they refused to fill out the form because they said that filling out the form would, in effect, be putting them in the position of participating in the process. I think a lot of people, including Catholics, Protestants, thought this was going a little bit far. But the court gave them a temporary stay. In doing this, I think the court is leaning over too much, really too much, for religious freedom, as opposed to the freedom of the larger community and the necessity of the larger community to have necessary laws enacted. And I say that knowing full well that the people on the Supreme Court who are making these decisions are all Roman Catholics, five Roman Catholic men, one of whom I would consider a good friend.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with Fred Rotondaro, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress, as Chairman of the Board of the organization Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. A second issue of great importance to Catholics is the situation of 50,000 children seeking asylum in the United States, and many Republicans clamoring to have them deported. Isn't this a perfect case for applying pro-life ideology the same way the Supreme Court did?
I think you're absolutely right, Jim. I think this situation is so incredibly sad. I think these kids who are coming into the United States are coming because they're escaping. They're escaping murder. They're escaping gang violence. They're escaping, in some cases, rape. They are escaping a situation in particularly Honduras of massive poverty and inequality. And by the way, I might direct some of our listeners to a very good article on this topic that appeared in the National Catholic Reporter a couple of weeks ago that coincidentally was written by my son, Vin Rotondaro. And Vinny started looking at this, and the basic theme of his article was these kids are escaping a situation that in large measure was created by the United States in our policies toward Latin America in the last dozen years. And for us to turn our backs on these kids is, I think, scandalous. I think the Tea Party, I think the Americans who are out there protesting against these kids should think back to their relatives, their families who came to America because they needed a refuge. I think this is a horrible thing. I really do. And I applaud the Catholic Church for taking the stance that it has. I am very, very, very delighted that Catholic bishops, the Jesuits, have really taken a strong stance on this.
And what's amazing is that there's the constant argument: these are illegals, they're illegals, they're entering illegally. These are refugees. This is really
exactly.
This is no different from the boat people back in the early 70s. It's no different from any other refugee situation. We didn't turn our backs on those folks. We haven't turned our backs on other refugees. Why are we turning our backs on these people?
Exactly, and I think we're turning our backs on these kids because, well, immigration has obviously been a volatile issue, and we have a number of people, particularly in the Deep South and particularly in some of the border states. Somebody like Rick Perry is looking upon this as an opportunity to run for president. I see him doing this. I see other politicians doing this. They are looking to appeal, very sadly and very, very tragically, to a very small percentage of the Republican base that is looking not to the past of America, that is looking not to the Statue of Liberty holding up its lamp, but that is looking to, frankly, it's looking to fear. It's looking to hatred. These people are grounded in the know-nothings of the 1840s. They're grounded in the Ku Klux Klan. They're grounded in an America that doesn't want Jews, that doesn't want Catholics, blacks, Hispanics. They want an America that really never was. And they are not, from my point of view, representative of anything that is good in American culture or history.
Absolutely.
Hitler wanted that stuff too.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did, and it's so, it's so sad. It's so really, really appalling. But I think you're absolutely right. Hitler wanted this stuff. So many of the dictators did. These are people who, for the most part, I think the extreme right wing, we call them conservatives. They're not conservatives. They're reactionaries. I was just starting to understand what was going on in politics barely when Dwight Eisenhower was president. Dwight Eisenhower was a conservative. So was Howard Baker. So was Ronald Reagan. These guys are not conservative. They are reactionaries. They're not conserving a damn thing.
We're speaking to Fred Rotondaro, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress, Chairman of the Board of the organization Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. Fred, didn't Pope Francis make an unprecedented statement on this issue aimed at the House of Representatives, which is led, by the way, by a Catholic, and having the Jesuits? True. The Jesuits have made an unusual political appeal to members of Congress they educated.
Jesuits, I love the Jebbies. I taught with the Jebbies for 5 years. I have 2 Jesuit degrees. And they went out and they went to Catholic members of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party where it suited. And they said, hey, this is a humanitarian issue. Jim, as you pointed out, these kids are refugees. Help them. Don't turn your backs on them. John Boehner is the Speaker of the House. He's Catholic. Chair of the Budget Committee is Catholic. Do you know that right now in the Republican Congress, in the House and in the Senate, there is no member of any religion except a Christian? All Republicans in both the House and the Senate, with Eric Cantor's resignation, are now Christian. And all I could say is I wish sometimes they would act in the spirit of Christ instead of the spirit of rejection and obstructionism that they seem to constantly undertake. But you're absolutely right. Pope Francis has spoken up for them. The Jesuits have. Cardinal Dolan has strongly come out in support of these kids. And as you know, I'm not always too happy with Cardinal right. Dolan. But you know what I wish the Catholics would do? Jim, what I wish is that Catholic priests and bishops would say, in the upcoming election, it's not all going to be about abortion. We're going to be looking at how you treated these kids. We're going to be looking at poverty. We're going to be looking at, did you follow the dictates that come to us from Pope Francis? And if you didn't, we're not going to say, well, Republicans claim they're opposed to abortion, therefore vote for them. I really wish the Catholic Church would, to be a little vulgar, turn the screws on some of these Republicans. I think it would be very good for the Republicans. I think it would be wonderful for the Catholic Church.
Along those lines, before we let you go, what do you make of the fact that only 14 Republicans signed on to a resolution in the House of Representatives to honor Pope Francis when he comes to the United States next year?
Needless to say, Jim, I found this absolutely hilarious. Particularly the reasons, as I understand it, there were 2 reasons. One is that the Pope is too liberal and he reminds him of Obama, and the other is that he is opposed to trickle-down economics. All I can say is I think the Pope should be declared a saint right here and now. I don't think we should wait at all. I do think this particular action by Republicans is just another example of how totally ridiculous they can get.
And somewhat out of touch. I mean,
I would say they are a tad out of touch. Touché, my friend.
Fred Rotondaro, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress, contributor to the Huffington Post as well as AmericasDemocrats.org, Chairman of the Board of Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. Fred, as always, a pleasure speaking with you. We appreciate your time with us today and look forward to doing it again soon.
Jim, thank you. Hey, I'll be back next month. Let's do lunch.
Sounds good. And this is AmericasDemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for Stand Up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box?
You can make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future and help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Washington journalist Chuck McCutcheon has written a book about political code words, explaining why so many people in power suddenly want to spend more time with their family. We'll talk to him about that in just a moment. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
When the going gets tough, Congress gets going. On vacation, that is. They're taking off this entire month and much of September and October, having howled about a host of huge issues, including the humanitarian crisis of immigrant children crossing the U.S.-Mexico border and the growing crisis of our nation's crumbling infrastructure. Congress did nothing, then bolted off the job. Okay, they did do one thing. They filed a frivolous lawsuit against President Obama, charging that he's been governing unilaterally by issuing executive orders. But there are at least 3 big problems with their suit. 1, Obama has issued far fewer executive orders than did George W., his GOP predecessor. 2, they claim that the president defied Congress by inadequately implementing the Obama health care reform. But, hello, Republicans fought that reform tooth and nail and are still trying to stop it from being implemented, meaning they're suing him for not doing something they don't want done. And 3, as they departed for vacation, howling House leaders said that in their absence, Obama should deport the suffering, terrorized migrant children who fled to the U.S. this summer. Incredibly, they demanded that, get this, the president should act unilaterally by issuing an executive order. These GOP Congress critters are nutty ideological zealots, but luckily they're also incompetent. Nonetheless, they are clogging the roadway, preventing any of the progress that America desperately needs. As a result, not only is the public fed up with them, but voter turnout is plummeting this year as people see that the Hell No faction has turned Democratic participation into a farce. So why bother? This is Jim Hightower saying, it's okay that these right-wingers are killing themselves, but it's not okay that they're also snuffing out America's democracy.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. What's the definition of reasonable Republicans? How about adults in the room? Sometimes they're one and the same, explains journalist Chuck McCutcheon, who has written a book about Washington jargon.
And we say hello to Chuck McCutcheon. He's a Washington journalist who has written, co-written, or edited 7 books. The subjects include nuclear waste, climate change, Congress, and politics. And he's co-author with David Mark of a forthcoming book called Dog Whistles, Walkbacks, and Washington Handshakes, Decoding the Jargon, Slang, and Bluster of American Political Speech. Chuck McCutcheon, good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Your dictionary of Washington speak is informative and amusing. But are you also making the point that there's a link between language corruption and political corruption?
Well, I wouldn't say there's an automatic link in each and every case, but certainly corruption can beget misuse of the language. We have a whole chapter just devoted to scandals in which we talk about how corruption will give birth to phrases like mistakes were made, or I misspoke, which is a way for someone to avoid taking responsibility for something they did. And then there's the all-time favorite expression, I want to spend more time with my family, which is a euphemistic excuse someone gives when they're leaving a job, but they don't want to say the real reasons why. Sometimes it's because of corruption.
Mm-hmm. Or, yeah, right, okay. I can think of all sorts of different reasons, and spending time with the family may not be one of them.
Exactly.
So if someone says, frankly, or let me be clear, is it a good bet that they're about to be neither frank nor clear?
Well, frankly, does sometimes actually telegraph frankness, but it's one of those words that gets used so often by politicians that it gets stripped of its power and meaning. I mean, let me be clear. We call that one the spiritual heir to Richard Nixon's "Let me make one thing perfectly clear." Frankly, is one of those words that you hear politicians say all the time. Newt Gingrich, in particular, says it all the time. We quote Paula Poundstone, the comedian, in our book, as saying she wonders what he's being when he's not being frank. And let me be clear, is more of an expression of exasperation that someone's not getting their point across. Obama says it a lot, Boehner says it a lot, and a lot of other people do too.
And the stalled Congress that we see, I wonder if there's any relationship between this language and that stalled Congress. I mean, let me be clear, nothing's getting done.
Right. Yeah, well, could be. We'll start paying more and more attention to it as they wrap up here. So.
This could be a great scientific experiment here, actually. Right. I mean, I think you're on the verge of something a lot bigger.
Right.
One of the things that annoys Democrats is the Republican obsession of calling them members of the Democrat Party, a seeming violation of grammar as well as courtesy. Who began that, and what do Republicans think they get out of it?
Well, I know it dates at least back to the time of Senator Joe McCarthy back in the communist hunting days. It was one of his favorites rhetorically. And yeah, you're right. Republicans do say it mainly because they know it irks Democrats. And we have a example in the book where I think it was Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur of Ohio, upbraiding a Republican who used the expression saying, it's not the Democrat Party, it's the Democrat Dick Party. So,
we're speaking with Chuck McCutcheon. He is the co-author with David Mark of the forthcoming book, Dog Whistles, Walkbacks, and Washington Handshakes, Decoding the Jargon, Slang, and Bluster of American Political Speech. I would imagine this book took a long time to write. I mean, when you think about all that bluster. But it does work both ways, right? I mean, people who were once proud to be liberals are now progressives, and federal spending became federal investment, right?
Right. Well, we do try to point out, though, that there are some people on the left who make a distinction between liberals and progressives. One of them, David Sirota, pretty well-known author and blogger, he said that, a liberal to him is someone who wants to use taxpayer money to make a better society, while progressive, their main aim is they want to use government power to make sure large institutions play by the same set of rules as everybody. So it's even on something you would think as clear-cut as that, there's some debate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and clearly two different definitions.
Right.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't the word entitlement been corrupted by conservatives to mean anyone who feels entitled to federal money rather than someone who, by virtue of his or her status, is eligible by law?
Yeah, we did not go into entitlement in the book, and yet it's come out so much that that we probably need to revisit. Maybe in our next edition. But there are definitely people on the left who say that the rights use of entitlement, and I just saw an example of this just the other day. Is just an attempt to try to make people out to be undeserving leeches. So that's definitely one where I think we need to maybe explore it further.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I would think so. I mean, because you hear it constantly now, and it was pretty strong going into the general election. In fact, it didn't work, but it was out there a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are many words and phrases that you explain very well. So let's bring up a few. What is a reasonable Republican?
Well, this is a phrase. Harry Reid uses this one a lot. He uses it to differentiate between the people in the Republican Party who want to make deals and get things done from the Tea Parties, whom he despises. Okay.
Who are the adults in the room?
They can be reasonable Republicans, or they can be Democrats, but they're most often described as grown-ups. Again, they're seen as people who favor deal-making and consensus over just tossing out rhetoric.
So at the moment, there aren't a whole lot of adults in the room. That's kind of what I get out of that.
Right.
Astroturfing. What is astroturfing?
This is a phrase that's been around for a long time, and this is something a large organization does to create the impression that a fake grassroots movement supports what they do.
Again, we're speaking with Chuck McCutcheon, co-author with David Mark, Dog Whistles, Walkbacks, and Washington Handshakes, Decoding the Jargon, Slang, and Bluster of American Political Speech. And we're talking about some of the terms that you'll find in the book. And another one, and I was not familiar with this, what is the Overton window?
The Overton window is a term that refers to what is considered the acceptable range of public discourse. It's named for Joseph Overton, who developed the idea at Michigan's Mackinac Center for Public Policy. He noticed that in some policy areas, only a narrow range of potential policies are really seen as palatable. And he said that this window of politically acceptable options is defined not by what politicians prefer, but rather by what they believe they can support and still win re-election. So in general, the window shifts to include different policy options, not when politicians change their ideas, but when the ideas change in the society that elects them. So the point is that if you're outside the Overton window, you're considered an outlier who's not part of the mainstream. And so for liberals, this would be advocating, a single-payer healthcare system. For conservatives, it would be people who want to just abolish the IRS or replace the income tax with a national sales tax or something like that. And we did cite an example of somebody, a Republican, who was harshly condemned for denigrating transgender people last fall. He said that all he was trying to do was to widen the Overton window.
Probably got himself tossed out the Overton window on that one. What does it mean to slow walk something?
It means to delay something on purpose. You'll often hear, if you listen to C-SPAN, senators referring to its synonym, which is dilatory tactics. When Senate Democrats tried to bring up climate change legislation back in 2009, the Republicans wanted the entire 492-page bill to be read, and Barbara Boxer, said that that's just a slow walk. It's a dilatory act on an issue that's most pressing, and now both sides, will sort of hurl this charge back and forth of each other of, well, you're just trying to slow walk something. Of course, you could argue that in this political climate, even a slow walk would be better than, the crawling we're seeing these days.
I was going to say I'd even take a crawl at this point. My goodness. And as they say in Congress, our time has expired. Chuck McCutcheon, Washington journalist, co-author with David Mark, the forthcoming book called Dog Whistles, Walkbacks, and Washington Handshakes, Decoding the Jargon, Slang, and Bluster of American Political Speech. Not overly wonky, right? I mean, this is kind of a fun yet informative sort of book.
Right. We tried to steer clear. We tried not to get into parliamentary terms like cloture and unanimous consent and things like that. We tried to make it fun. The idea is that hopefully somebody who doesn't live in this town and wants to understand politics a little bit better can pick this up and hopefully learn a thing or two from it and hopefully get a laugh or two out of it.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's good stuff. Chuck, we really appreciate your time with us today on americasdemocrats.org, and we would love to have you back for the second edition.
Oh, thank you.
Because there's got to be one. All right, thanks again, Chuck. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. And now Bill Press and his guest, Ohio Democratic congressional candidate Michael Wager.
A couple of weeks ago, I had a lot of fun helping out at a boot camp for congressional candidates, which was organized by Christine Pelosi, Democratic activist and good friend of mine from California, San Francisco, daughter of course. And it was held at the AFSCME headquarters in downtown Washington, D.C. There were maybe 8 or 10 candidates, Democratic candidates for Congress all around the country. And one of the ones that impressed me the most was Michael Wager, who is a candidate for Congress from the 14th Congressional District of Ohio. We want you to meet some of these great, outstanding Democratic candidates around the country between now and the November elections. We're going to start today with Michael Wager and tell you how what he's all about and what the issues he cares about and how you can reach out and help no matter where you are in the country. Michael, good to connect again. How are you?
Bill, good morning.
Right,
Thank you for having me on your show, and thank you for being part of the boot camp last week.
That was fun, yeah, and I got to tell you, you've been endorsed by AFSCME, I notice, as well, so any friend of AFSCME is a friend of ours. So.
I appreciate those words.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the 14th Congressional District. What part of Ohio and what cities? What's it all about?
So the 14th Congressional District is the northeast corner of the state. It's all or parts of 7 counties, including parts of Cuyahoga County, where the largest city, Cleveland, is located, although it's not the city of Cleveland. In fact, it's not any large city. It is a grouping of small former manufacturing towns, rural areas, and suburban areas of Cleveland and Akron.
Now, you are the candidate. Primary is over. You're Democratic candidate. You move around those counties. What are the issues that people really care about? What are they telling you that that they want you to do when you get to Washington?
The issues you hear about in the 14th are consistent with the issues that are talked about nationally and that are reflected in polls. And people are, first of all, concerned, frustrated with regard to the dysfunction in the United States Congress, with the partisan rancor, and what they talk about when they talk about substantive issues are the ones that most affect them, which are economic issues, and for people who are seniors or approaching senior years, they're concerned about the safety of the Social Security program. They're concerned about the safety and the continuance of Medicare, because oftentimes those programs are used as sacrifices on the altar of budget austerity by too many of the Republicans in the U.S. House and in the U.S. Congress. If you're younger, I hear a lot about I can't find a job, or if I do, the wages are inadequate, or if there's students, the cost of education is too high and the debt is too burdensome.
Student loans, I'm sure. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, Ohio is one of the states that under maybe one good thing I can think of that John Kasich has done is he did accept the expansion of Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, correct?
That is correct, and the governor deserves accolades for accepting that within a state assembly that would not approve it. He did it through an administrative workaround, which is really to his credit.
Right. Now, so what about the Affordable Care Act? How has it been received in your district? What do you hear about that?
Well, it's been, as you know, it's been demonized everywhere, including Cleveland. Last night I had an encounter at an event out in Lake County, which is the most populous of the ones in the 14th, and a small businessman approached me with his wife, who actually works for the Cleveland Clinic, so she understands health care, and he talked about the fact that it was requiring young people to pay a portion of the burden for older people, i.e. the baby boomers coming into the system. It was wrong, and that if government wasn't going to pay for other people's health care, he's okay with changes, but we can't have them. We can't have the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as he characterized it, telling people that they need to have insurance and requiring them to pay for sicker people. When I explained to him that insurance risk pools are about spreading risk and cost, just like we do in every state for auto insurance, he listened a little more closely. But there's already been several years of demonizing what's otherwise a program that covers more people, covers people, as we know, with pre-existing conditions, and some other very, very credible and admirable achievements by this administration and the 111th Congress.
Would you have voted for Obamacare?
I would have, yes. I think it's, in some respects, still a half measure, but I would have voted for it.
Would you invite President Obama in to campaign for you?
I absolutely would, and I would do it for two reasons. First of all, he's the president and the leader of my party, and I still do believe that Democrats stand for something different from Republicans. But I'd also want him in the 14th district because I get a chance then to reintroduce him to some of the challenges in my district.
Right. Same with Nancy Pelosi?
Absolutely, and I'll tell you a little anecdote about Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi was just outside my district on the Women on a Roll tour back in June.
Yeah.
And I was photographed with her, even though I spoke before the bus arrived with her and Rosa DeLauro and the women in the Ohio delegation. And that photograph is now used by my opponent as a fundraising device, which, of course, much like so much of what the Obama administration has done, anything that Nancy Pelosi has done gets demonized. But no, she stands for the things I stand for. I believe if I get a chance to explain why Nancy Pelosi is here on my behalf, that voters will understand.
And you are running against a Republican incumbent, David Joyce, correct?
That's correct. Freshman.
A freshman, right. Will you have a chance to debate the issues with him?
Bill, I hope so. It's interesting you asked me that this week. We published earlier this week a half-a-page advertisement in the primary newspaper in our primary county challenging him to a debate in each of the 7 counties. We'd issued that challenge last month, and it's now falling on deaf ears. I'm not certain that I will get an opportunity to appear with him in a debate forum anytime between now and November 4th.
In other words, he's ducking the debates, is what I hear you.
Exactly. I would use the word duck as well. Duck, dodge, you can choose them.
Wow. Well, that says a lot, I think, about what he thinks about you, right? He sees you obviously as a threat, and also what he thinks about his constituents, that they are not smart enough to see the two candidates and make the right choice.
He has largely spent his 20 months in the U.S. House avoiding voters, not being on the record unless he has to take a vote. So it's from his perspective, if he can avoid telling voters what he stands for, which I think is to the right of where the majority of the voters are in this district, it's to his benefit, and that's been his strategy from the time he took office.
Does the immigration issue reach the 14th congressional district in any real way?
It doesn't, and it does in a very meaningful way, but not one that necessarily affects elections. There are likely in the 14th a large number of undocumented workers because we have large agricultural and greenhouse businesses in this district.
Right. Yep.
And there is, in fact, a Hispanic community in one of the towns in the 14th. And I am told anecdotally that there are a number of people who are looking for the kind of immigration reform which would bring them into the mainstream of American life. But the immigration issue is not front and center the way it would be in Texas, Florida, or California.
Right. And that, of course, is one of the big issues facing the Congress today. You know about the comprehensive immigration reform legislation that passed the Senate with 14 Republican votes, actually, over a year ago. If you were in the House today, would you support that?
I would absolutely support it, and I think in the context of what's happening on our southern border, the fact that these members of Congress left on 5 weeks of recess or paid vacation and addressed this by providing too little for what they call border security, knowing the president wouldn't sign it, was simply shameful. Yeah,
just unbelievable that they would run out of town without doing anything at all about that issue, and then they say, well, maybe the president can solve it by executive action. Right, 2 days after they voted to sue him for doing anything by executive action.
Well, that's not only that's not the only anomaly, Bill. I mean, that very suit is to force the president to do something that they apparently find abhorrent, enforce the Affordable Care Act and the employer mandate.
Mm-hmm. Right, something that they said they wanted. Michael Wager, a great candidate for Congress out in the 14th Congressional District in Ohio. How can people find you, Michael, and find out more about the campaign?
Well, first of all, our social media presence, our website at michaelwagerforohio.com. We're also very active on Facebook and Twitter. Our Twitter handle is michaelwager14. supported by a lot of progressives around the country. You don't win a race like this, and the only swing district left in the quintessential swing state simply relying on support here in Ohio. We need support of Democrats and progressives across the country.
All right. Hope we can help out on that. It's Wager, W-A-G-E-R, by the way, and it's Michael Wager for Ohio.com. Good luck, Michael. We'll talk again.
Go Press. Thank you.
All right. Michael Wager.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Fred Rotondaro, Chuck McCutcheon, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us, support the show, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate.